Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Marwan Ahmed. I am with the US Halal Consultants. Today's webinar is about starting halal business in the US. We have two experts who will be addressing different issues on starting a business and the challenges and opportunities. But first, I'd like to wish everybody Ramadan Kareem and Ramadan Mubarak, and hopefully everybody is having a blessed Ramadan. To begin, I'd like to start with dua. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Many people think about starting their own business, and specifically today we're talking about starting halal business. It's important when people start a business that they are prepared. The saying goes, people don't plan to fail, but they fail to plan sometimes. And we want to be here today to help and discuss ways to be prepared and plan for the success of a halal business. And it's not much different from a success of any other business to prepare and get ready for it, except the focus today is on halal. Things that people need to consider first before they even start registering a business. Concepts of market study and market research in the product or the service that they want to provide. They need to develop a business plan. You don't know how many people we talk to. They want to start a business because they have a great idea. In many cases it is, but they don't put it on paper. They don't create a business plan before they start, so they have a clear pathway to their business. Marketing development and strategy is also critical. Budgeting for your business, having enough cash flow and funding to launch your business and maintaining your business at least for a year without anticipating income for that business. If profit comes earlier, great, but no business should begin without having a budget set to secure the business and to secure the livelihood of the owner who's running the business. Then other issues that they considered: distribution, which is also could be tied to marketing. And lastly, the most important, very important step before launching is the legal issue, registering the business legally, appropriately, that matches the type of business that is going to be in the market. So today with us, we have two experts. They're both lawyers. Each one will be talking from their background and knowledge and perspective on starting a halal business. We will start with Brother Abid Awad, CEO of ShariaWiz.com. He's also a consultant with the US Halal Consultants. Then we'll go with Elizabeth Myers, our Executive VP at US Halal Consultants. So Abid, it's all yours. Take it from here and please enlighten us.
السلام عليكم والصلاة والسلام على الصادق الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Ramadan Mubarak and Ramadan Kareem to everyone. Thank you very much, Marwan, for that great introduction. And thank you, Elizabeth, for working hard to organize this event today. I mean, we're hoping to have this as a conversational program. Just going to lay some big picture framework here. If you are a follower of trends in the United States, we know that a unregulated capitalism can be pretty harsh and destructive to American society and to the world for that matter. That's why you start having these trends of people talking about compassionate conservatism and, socially responsible capitalism and so forth and so on. These are trends and discussions because when we look at the United States and you look at the gap between the rich and the poor, it's quite devastating. That 1% of the country controls 40-50% of the wealth of this great nation. And then when you look at surveys of our elderly, AARP did a survey that members of the AARP, 50% of them did not have a couple of $100 as a safety net if they needed to fix something at their home. So we have a serious moral and ethical problem in the United States with the poverty, with the gap between the rich and the poor, and with low wages. So there is a trend amongst morally thinking people about corporations having moral responsibility, ethical responsibility about doing business. So Islamic finance and the faith-based underpinnings of Muslim lifestyle are anchored in social responsibility and ethical accountability and paying your wages to people who work with you. There's a famous tradition by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that you pay your worker before his sweat even dries. An emphasis on providing fair wages and fair labor. So with this environment, it is not a surprise that there's a rapid increase in Muslim businesses that are popping up around the country, focused on this moral responsibility and this ethical responsibility, because we're accountable to God. We're not accountable to a government agency or our board. We have to run our businesses with transparency, with fair wages, with fair profits, and so forth. So with this, you can see that there's a market for socially responsible investment, socially responsible building. Now, to do this, we at Halal Consultants and at Halal Council, and amongst many other like-minded Muslim American entrepreneurs around the country, want to create a halal ecosystem. Because when we talk about socially responsible entrepreneurship and a Sharia compliant entrepreneurship and halal, it doesn't mean just your food. It doesn't mean just, the way you slaughter animals and, how you eat your food. A halal ecosystem is an ethical lifestyle. Everything from your finances to how you do business, to how you dissolve your marriage, to how you distribute your estate, to how you invest your money, how you eat, how you marry. This is a lifestyle. So when you are looking to break into this burgeoning ecosystem, there's a lot of opportunities, not only in halal food. I've identified, I'm going to use myself as an example, is as a lawyer who primarily represents Muslim American and Arab American, I started noticing in my client base people needing estate plan, meaning that they need a will, they need a trust, they need a power of attorney, a living will. So when we would sit down and I would prepare these estate plans for them, they would ask me religious questions. I mean, do you think this is halal, what I'm doing? Is this proper? I want this to be Sharia compliant. So I realized that there is a demand in the estate planning field and space that people want to organize their end of life issues within their religious faith. So I said, okay, now it's expensive to hire a lawyer. Maybe if I am able to automate, create these models that would be workable, merge technology with Sharia compliance, we may be able to provide a service for the Muslim American community. And that was the idea behind the birth of ShariaWiz.com, which is an estate planning platform that Muslim Americans are able to come to the website and create a will-based estate plan, a trust-based estate plan at the comfort of their computer at home. So I identified that there was a need in this. Then I went ahead and created an LLC, created a team of lawyers and Sharia experts, conducted the research, understood what the market demand is, and we created a faith-based estate plan to be another piece of the puzzle of the eco-halal system. There are Islamic finance companies popping up. If you look at Azad in DC, one of the largest mutual fund companies in the United States, they also identified this sense of social responsibility that the Quran specifically says that your money has to be halal. In fact, the Quran describes taking riba as the worst capital sin there is, that you will rot in hell and burn in hell by taking this riba, because how damaging it is on society. So other companies are using technology like Wahid, the first online and app-based Sharia-compliant investment platform. So what you see is that there is demand in financial services that are Sharia compliant. There's demand in food services that are Sharia compliant. There's demand in beauty supplies that are Sharia compliant, in fashion that's Sharia compliant. There's demand in investment funds being Sharia compliant. This entire ecosystem, everything about our life is organized around the social responsibility. So this is an area that is going to get more and more important for us as Muslim Americans, but also for Americans at large. Because this ethical business entrepreneurship, you don't have to be Muslim to want to comply with some of these restrictions. So I think that, over time, if we as Muslim Americans, all of us cooperate, and we use our innovative and entrepreneurship that's programmed in our DNA as a young immigrant community, we can create this ecosystem that will eventually mainstream. So when we talk about kosher food, for example, it got to a point that the branding of kosher food would give you the sense that the kosher food is high quality, and that it is sourced in a humane manner, and it is very expensive and high quality. The halal brand is also on this trajectory, is that the halal can also represent, high quality, moral responsibility, socially accountable. So I think that this is the big picture that I would like to provide our listeners, is that this is a very, very exciting period to be involved in Muslim American business entrepreneurship, specifically in this creation of this halal ecosystem. And I'm happy to answer any questions after my colleague Elizabeth presents some of the nuts and bolts of how to establish businesses around the United States. And we can also take into account there's the regulatory requirements that some of these issues from halal slaughters, halal mark branding, there are different state regulations that you have to take into account, and we all have to cooperate to come to terms with some sort of a national certification process so that we can rid the market of fraud and misrepresentations about being halal when in fact they are not. It's your turn, Elizabeth. Take your presentation, and hopefully we can have a conversation afterwards.
You are muted, Elizabeth.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I was going to say, unless Marwan wants to say anything in between. Marwan?
Well, the only thing is, I agree with what Abed said. Halal market is largely unregulated today. There are a lot of holes for potential misrepresentation or misleading information, and we want to help regulate this and work with organizations like American Halal Council and others to make sure that things are transparent. So Elizabeth, I know you will also add other angles to the discussion about starting halal business. Please take it from here.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was a marvelous introduction by Abed. Very, very comprehensive in terms of the things you need to think about before you even start a company. What I'm going to do is talk about the nuts and bolts of starting a company, an entrepreneur, whether you're an entrepreneur here in the US or even an entrepreneur who's looking in from the outside, as we're hoping that our reach is going to be in other parts of the Muslim world that want to export their products to the United States. So let me cover just a few of the nuts and bolts here. First of all, you have to consider what kind of company you are going to form. In the US, there are several different kinds of companies: corporations, LLCs, which are limited liability companies, and whether a non-citizen can own one of these companies. And the answer to the latter question is yes. And typically for an initial, an entrepreneur who's going to be starting initially a small business, you'd want to go with an LLC. So what are the steps? It doesn't provide all of the protections for you as an individual that a corporation would, but it's much easier to both form and to and easier on a tax from a tax standpoint, in that it is a pass-through entity, and therefore the entity itself doesn't pay taxes. So what are the steps to forming an LLC in the United States? First of all, you have to select your state. Now, if you are already living here in the United States, most likely you're going to want to pick your own state that you live in, and where you want to do business. If you're considering a state, if you're on the outside of the US and considering which state, you probably want to consider the tax considerations, the tax differences between the states, because taxes are different. We have a system of federalism here where we have a federal government that taxes businesses and individuals, corporations and individuals, and other entities. And we have each state, each of the 50 states has its own tax structure. And some states have zero taxes. So you might, if you're looking in from outside of the US, consider a state that doesn't have state taxes, because then you would only have to pay federal taxes. So there are 9 states without income taxes. And just I'll give you those: Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. And so in those states, you wouldn't have to pay taxes on the income that you receive through the business done by the company. It would only be federal taxes. Now, 2 of these states did tax investment earnings, which are things like interest, dividends, and capital gains. Those are New Hampshire and Tennessee. They taxed those in 2020, but as I understand it, Tennessee has now repealed its law taxing investment income as of 2021. So perhaps the state that's known as the most corporate friendly is Delaware in terms of taxes. And perhaps the state that's most foreigner friendly, if you want to put it that way, which means there are lower filing and annual fees, no state, personal, or corporate or capital gains taxes, is Wyoming. Then you have to decide what the name of your LLC is going to be. And before you do that, you need to check a few things. If you plan to be on the internet, for example, as anyone who is not insane plans to do these days, you would have to check whether the domain name that you want to establish for your company is available. That is the name that you will use for it on the internet. You then also have to check the corporate name availability in the state that you are going to form your LLC in. And every state, again, has its own rules about the kinds of names that they will allow for LLCs. There are some general guidelines, though, that you consider. Typically, the name must include the phrase limited liability company or LLC in whatever abbreviated form, with periods or without periods, you want to use. But the name cannot typically include words that would confuse your LLC with a government entity like FBI or Treasury or State Department or something like that. And also there are certain restricted words that imply some kind of professional qualification that, unless you have that professional qualification, you would want to avoid. things like university or bank or other, law firm kind of thing that implies that you have that professional accreditation. You also have to designate a registered agent for your company. And the reason you have to do that is that the company needs to be able to accept service of legal papers. And so typically not typically, but you have to have a registered agent in the state that is a resident of the state that you are beginning your LLC in. But what is a registered agent? It is a person or a business that can send and receive legal papers on your behalf. And that includes things like summonses, summonses to court, various official filings and documents. If you're starting a non-resident owned business, for example, you're outside of the US, it's probably a good idea to hire a registered agent service to perform that function for you, because then they have a presence on the ground, they have an address in the US, and they are open at the times in which service of process and documents is typically done, which is business hours. Then, once you've figured out the state that you're going to file in, the name of your company, you've made sure it's available, there's no other company with that exact name in the state, and the domain is available, then you need to file your LLC with the state. And what that entails is usually filing articles of organization. They can also be called a certificate of formation or certificate of organization. And this is the actual formation document that outlines the structure, the organizational structure of your business. And typically you can file those electronically in most, if not all states now. You have to pay certain state filing fees. And there is also typically a publication requirement that requires you to put that a notice of the formation of your new LLC in 1 or 2 newspapers for a certain period of time. And you have to then certify that you've done that to the state. You also, in the course of that, filing the articles of organization, you are going to have to choose whether you're going to be member managed or manager managed. And that is I'll just touch on that here. You should look into what that means exactly. Typically, if you're a small LLC, if you have either one member or very few members in the organizational structure, you're going to be member managed because those members will be involved in the everyday activity and running of the company. If you have multiple members that don't want to be involved, then you need to designate a manager to handle the everyday operation. And that's the sort of thing you have to specify in your filing. Then you need to create an LLC operating agreement. Now, although most states don't require one, it's a good idea to have one. Why? Because it is a legal document that outlines the ownership and operating procedures of your LLC. And what that does is make sure that the owners, if there are multiple owners, they're on the same page for how the organization is going to run, and that avoids the risk of future conflicts that may result in expensive lawsuits. Next thing you need to do is get an employer identification number for the LLC. That is essentially a tax ID, and every LLC needs to have that. You can do that online through the IRS, typically. If you are a non-resident, non-US resident, you can also do that by fax or mail, although online is much more expedient if you are a resident. Literally can happen in a matter of minutes. You also need to have a physical US mailing address, which is, the reason for that is in order to open a bank account, you need a physical US address. If you don't plan on having a brick and mortar physical address, or you're outside of the U.S., there are some services that you can that can set you up with an address to receive your mail, and you can find some of those on the internet. Then, in order to conduct financial transactions, you must open a bank account, and you open a business bank account for the company once you've formed the LLC and received your tax ID. But note that you normally have to actually go into the bank to do this, because the US has some pretty stringent money laundering laws, and banks are required to know their clients. So if you are a non-US resident, you will need to actually travel to the US to visit the bank to do this. And in that regard, you should consider whether you need visas to do that and how much time it's going to take to get visas. And I would also suggest that you contact the bank beforehand to make sure that you are bringing the right documents with you. So that's the basic process of forming an LLC, which is a very basic and relatively easy thing to do if you keep in mind the parameters and the pitfalls that I mentioned, and make sure that you pick the right name and you make sure that it's available. So I guess a lot of people are going to be asking, do I need a lawyer for this? I would say that for the specific purpose of forming your LLC, you don't really need a lawyer. It's almost as easy and as quick as what I've just been talking to you about in the last 10 minutes, I guess. And but in the halal space and in many other spaces and business areas that are either slightly regulated, as in halal is, or heavily regulated, as in, for example, the energy industry is, it is a good idea to have somebody on your team who knows how the regulated system functions in order for you to be in compliance with your business. Obviously, if we're talking food, there are certain requirements of labeling, of registration, of you have to avoid things like fraud in labeling. When you say things are halal, they need to be halal. One of the tricks, and Abed referred to this earlier, is that we need standards. The standards are not only not in conformity all over the country, but they're also not recognized in the laws all over the country. There are really only 9 states that have any kinds of laws dealing with halal, and the federal government under the USDA only has a policy. And so you have to keep in mind that compliance is tricky depending on your state. And also, I will note that we did have a webinar a couple of months ago on this, so you can refer to that in general. But because the regulatory situation is inconsistent and evolving right now, as Abed says, the halal industry is a young industry. We can learn a lot from the kosher industry, which is probably around 20 years ahead of where we are in terms of regulation governing what is kosher and what's not kosher. But that means that regulatory compliance is tricky. And for that, I really suggest you do need a lawyer. And also, there is a need for advocacy. Advocacy right now at the state levels and also at the federal level, because there is no single halal policy. There is no single set of rules or regulations that companies can go to and be certain they're going to be in compliance. Finally, I will recommend that you consider trade association memberships, such as US Halal Consultants. Yes, this is a shameless plug for that, because it's important to know how the industry is changing. It's important to know how regulations change, and it's important to have a seat at the table when changes are being considered in terms of policy and regulations. So I think that's about the size of what I had to say. Hope I didn't go on too long. If you have questions, happy to try and answer some.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Abid, for the introduction. I know you gave the basics of starting halal or business in the US. I'm sure people who are watching us live or will be watching this video later on, they'll have many questions on their mind. Since I don't have any live questions at the moment, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions myself. So my first question to Abid is, you started your own shariawiz.com, and it's been around for over a year now. MashaAllah, it seems to be successful. You did touch on how you prepared for your business. Can you elaborate more about what somebody who wants to start a new business in the halal industry should do? What kind of homework they should go through to be prepared and not fail?
Well, I mean, you summarize some of the basics of 101 entrepreneurship. You got to identify if there's a market, and once you identify that there's a market, you need to build a business plan that is trying to assess and evaluate the size of this particular market, and you want to also do your budgeting, that it may take more than 1 year before you can start breaking even. In these Sharia compliant projects, they are not immediate return on your investment. They're going to take years. I mean, we're doing extremely well at Sharia Wiz, but it's still the cost to do a high-end Sharia compliant project is expensive. So all businesses have to budget 2-3 years that you have to continue to fund the project. You can't give up, because these are, you have to understand that this is a niche market. So your market is not the 350 million Americans. Your market is the 5 or 6 million Muslims. And these 5 or 6 million Muslims are all over. So you need to know how you're going to reach them. So the key issue for us, we have a solid product. We've developed a brand and a name, but we're investing a lot on marketing and trying to understand how to market to Muslim Americans, whether from messaging or how do you reach that market. So digital marketing is what's key. Affiliations and relationships. We as a community, mainstream Americans have consumer reports. Muslim Americans have what my cousin said, or what my uncle said, or what my imam said. So we don't have consumer reports. So you have to develop those types of relationships with your local imam, with your Muslim American organizations, because people need credibility. Too many businesses come to life, and within months they're out of business. So people don't have trust if it's a new business. So it does take a little bit of time to create loyalty and sustainability, that you're not a flyby. And to be able to get to that point, you need the financing. So if you have the financing yourself, or you need to bring in partners to help you finance your project. So marketing is key. You really need to identify who is your target. And once you understand who that target is, you want to see if the market is sizable enough to sustain your business. What we did is we put all our budgets together. We have full-time software engineers. We have consultant software engineers, full-time software engineers. We have lawyers that are on staff. We have Islamic experts and regular staff. And so we added all of these salaries and overhead, and understood what our break-even scenario is. And that's what every business has to do. You before you open your doors or you launch your website, you need to know what your break-even is. Now, if you're selling products, you got to find a logistics distribution center to help you save money instead of you getting your own brick and mortar. My son is a entrepreneur, and he's running a international shipping logistics company in northern New Jersey, next to the Newark airport. And what they do is they have entrepreneurs who have solid digital marketing and an online presence, and they don't want to invest in staff and warehousing. My son warehouses their products, connects to their e-commerce, and fulfills for them. So all of a sudden, you could take an idea and get to market that's Sharia compliant with minimal investment. And if you take off, you can consider opening your own warehouse and having staff and mailing and so forth, or stay within the logistics. So it's not hard to start businesses today. Technology has really provided a platform to get to market faster than you think. You have to have a good idea and know your break even. And make sure you have the financing, because I learned it the hard way. I was still young. I invested in a business back in 2002, 2003. A lawyer friend of mine was general counsel to a big developer, and it was a major, huge mall. And they gave me a favorable lease for a restaurant, food establishment at a high luxury mall. And I thought, I'm a lawyer. What do I know about restaurants? So I went and I invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into this endeavor. And because it was without experience in the food industry, I started out with a $5,500 weekly staff salary when I could have run the restaurant no more than $2,000. By the time I figured out how to run the restaurant with $2,000 in salary obligations, I ran out of money and wasn't able to continue the business. Now, the person who bought the restaurant from me, he's still operating 18 years later and making millions at that location. So I learned the hard part is that financing is key. You need to have access to capital to sustain startups, because they will take time before they take off.
Thank you so much, Abid. This is insightful from somebody who's done it hands-on and learned from experience and continues to grow. I think halal businesses have another or additional layer of challenge, which ensuring that doing all the steps and the process correctly, but also on top of this, they have to make sure their product is halal compliant. And that leads us to the point, since we're in Ramadan today and we're living the high spiritual lifestyle, halal lifestyle of the year, we need to ensure that our business is halal, not only in products and services, but also in conduct. How we treat our customers, how we treat our employees, and how we make our business serve the big picture of being ethical business, which is synonymous of halal, and should be this way and should continue this way. And that's part of the reason we exist today, us and the American Halal Council and other halal organizations in the US and around the globe. Earlier today, I was on a meeting with the Malaysian technology company who is doing amazing work to empower the halal ecosystem. And we're working together to implement these technologies through different facets of halal industries, not just food like most people think about. The other thing I want to touch on is the failure of marketing a business. I meet many businesses who have beautiful products, great services. They build a website and they start a social media page and they stop. They fail to brand what they built. Now you're online. You're competing with millions and millions of similar websites, but nobody knows you're there. What is the next step as a business to take your products and a website basically on social media and make them visible? Is by marketing, like you mentioned, Abid, and I know you do a lot of marketing, and more people need to understand what marketing takes. I see many small business owners. I know they're startups and their funding is small. They try to do it their own on themselves. They try to build the website themselves because tools are available. They manage their social media themselves, which is fine when your budget is very limited. But you're better off spending your time and energy on what you do best. You're developing your product and your services, not running around and juggling between the website and social media and emails and doing virtual events like this. It takes a lot of effort. When you start to break even and see some successes, start to delegate this kind of work and services to others so they can help you and you can focus on what you do best. I'm going to turn the question to Elizabeth and ask you, US Halal Consultants, what can it do for a business in the US or internationally that is either starting or growing? They're already in business, but they want to grow. We have two types of businesses here. Tell us a little bit more about what this group can do.
Well, thank you for that great question. Having given the shameless plug for US Halal Consultants before, let me answer that by saying, first of all, we do have a number of consultants who are member consultants, around about a dozen, and the number is growing, who can help you do many of the things that both Abid and Marwan have just been talking about, like marketing, like market research, like certainly the legal stuff. We have two lawyers on the call here. And there, with perhaps almost any area that you need advice in, we have somebody who can help. Certification, accreditation, all of those things. And what I would also encourage you to do is check out our previous webinars on these subjects. And they're not only located in and around the Washington area, but they're located really all around the world. And the numbers are growing all the time. So I encourage you to check out our website and see what membership would entail for you. We also have trainings that we are getting ready to provide. One of the most important things that people in the halal food industry need to worry about is FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, also the USDA policy. And so we have a training that we are working on, hoping to present probably in June on that particular issue. So stay tuned for that. So I would just encourage you to get in touch with us and see how we can help your particular business. I think you're on mute, Marwan.
We're at the last quarter of our webinar. Abid, would you like to give any closing remarks before we end the session today?
Yes. This is very exciting time to be an entrepreneur in this space. You got to take risk, but it should be calculated. And like Elizabeth said, we have a lot of resources available at the US Halal Council. We're happy to guide you to professionals to help you, whether it's in the marketing or developing the business plan, or you need any legal advice. Elizabeth and I are attorneys. We have contacts and lawyers all over the country. I have relationships literally in probably 40 states that I know lawyers that I've worked with or I've done cases with. So we're there. And if you needed recommendations for Sharia scholars and experts, we also have a vast network of Sharia scholar relationships that could help you, because, you know, in my case, as Sharia Wiz, we utilize the services of Raqaba, Dr. Abdul Bari Mish'al, a very well-known Sharia scholar, had done the testing to verify the accuracy of our Islamic inheritance calculator, and gave us a certification. So that this is another layer about our Sharia compliance. So these are just basic parameters to get your feet wet. And if you need anything in addition to that, just reach out to our offices in DC. Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Yes, I would just add that really our networks are very broad, and not just the legal network as well. I was formerly in a 600-person law firm based in the Midwest, and I keep up those contacts. I'm also the former president of a bar association in Washington, D.C. that is having its 50th anniversary, and we have a little prep meeting for that tonight of former presidents. So but it's not just lawyers. Our network extends to all kinds of consultants in the tourism industry, cosmetics, food preparation, food slaughter, all kinds of different areas, and we try and have fun and do what we do. I mean, this is part of the halal lifestyle. We want to be ethical. We want to help people run their businesses ethically, but have fun at the same time, because if you're not following your passion and doing what you love, you're not going to do it well. And that's what we want to do. We want to help businesses succeed.
Thank you. And just to add to that, we have been talking to businesses in the US who needed advice and support. We also been approached by companies from Malaysia, from Britain, Turkey. Everybody wants to do business in the US, and we understand that, but entering a large market like the US takes a lot of preparation, legally, and business structuring and planning and so on. So we're happy to assist. We always give first meeting complimentary to advise those who are interested in the market, whether they're already in the US or they want to enter the US market. And then from there, we tell them what we can offer and what is missing, and we can build a plan for them so to become successful. Our website is under halalexpo.com/USHC. It is listed in the comments, and it's also listed in the banner under our images. So please visit the site, learn more, and we hope to talk to you soon and help you become a successful halal business in the US. Thank you for watching us today. Thank you, Abed Awad from New Jersey, or New York, is it?
I'm in New Jersey, New York, New Jersey.
And thank you, Elizabeth, from New York. Seems like
my pleasure.
Is dominant today. And wishing everybody and you all a happy and Ramadan Kareem and Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Ramadan Mubarak. Bye-bye.